I said to Yulia Navalnaya, do you think that the Europeans, maybe the wider world, should be angrier at these aggressions that Putin continues to wage against Europe, as well as the war in Ukraine? And her answer was, I don't think the Europeans or the world should be angry with Putin. She said, I think the world should be brave and confident in confronting Putin.
Almost immediately after Russian opposition leader Alexi Navalny was murdered by the Kremlin last year in an Arctic penal colony, Russian President Vladimir Putin turned his eyes to Navalny's widow, Yulia Navalnaya. She knows that nowhere is safe for her, not even flying to Australia as she did this week. She was once a victim of poisoning, and a Russian court has issued an arrest warrant for her on charges of extremism. Today, international and political editor Peter Hartcher joins me to discuss how Yulia Navalnaya is combating Vladimir Putin and fighting for a normal Russia, even as Putin is being welcomed into open arms by an increasing number of democratic leaders. So first off, Peter, I have to say, you managed to interview Yulia Navalnaya in person on Tuesday morning in Sydney. And as I understand it, she only gives one interview in each country that she visits. And she gave it to you. So first off, congratulations.
Well, thank you. I don't need any particular congratulations or credentials. It was, they approached me.
It's a big deal, though, so let's get into it. Can you just start off by telling us who Yulia Navalnaya is and how she came to become, as you've written, the de facto leader of the opposition in Russia, which is, as I understand it, not something she ever intended to be?
Yulia Navalnaya is a 49-year-old Russian woman, an economist, who then married Alexi Navalny and became his staunch partner in his campaign against corruption in Russia, and corruption in particular in the Putin regime, and his greatest advocate and defender in pursuit of elected office. He intended to run for the presidency. He never quite got there because Putin barred him, but the closest he got was he did run for the mayor of Moscow and got about 27% of the vote in a heavily rigged and rorted campaign, by the way, so 27% in those circumstances is pretty good.
Thousands of supporters of defeated Moscow mayoral candidate Alexi Navalny have gathered in the Russian capital to protest against the poll, which Navalny claims was rigged in favour of the pro-Kremlin incumbent, Sergei Sobyanin. The anti-corruption campaigner polled 27%, a huge surprise for President Putin's united Russia.
So after he demonstrated that he was a threat, therefore, to Putin, he was repressed in a whole sequence of arrests, detentions, tortures, Novichok attacks, the nerve agent which nearly killed him. Yulia saved him, by the way, in that circumstance, and turned personally to Putin and insisted that he be allowed to go to Germany for treatment, which saved his life. And he was screaming in agony as he suffered what he described as the step-by-step shutdown of his bodily functions. He was conscious of what was going on, but unable to control his body, and he was saved by a German hospital.
It's been almost 2 weeks since Alexei Navalny fell into a coma on an early morning flight from Siberia. These his terrible cries of pain on board before he lost consciousness, which Russian medical staff attributed to low blood sugar levels. Now, this stark announcement from the German Chancellor.
Alexei Navalny was the victim of an attack with a chemical nerve agent of the Novichok group. This poison could be identified unequivocally in tests, so it's clear that Alexei Navalny is the victim of a crime.
Where Angela Merkel visited him, by the way.
That's right.
As well, to encourage him to keep up his work and, quote, no rush going back to Russia. But of course he did. As soon as he was well enough, he returned to Russia.
Navalny returned to Russia in 2021 and was detained upon his arrival for what the Russian Federal Prison Service said were repeated violations of his probation. He would never leave custody again.
Somehow, Alexi Navalny, Russian President Vladimir Putin's fiercest and most energetic critic, dropped dead suddenly at a penal colony in Siberia. Prison officials say Navalny went for a walk but felt unwell and quickly lost consciousness. They said medics could not revive him.
Since his murder by Putin's regime in an Arctic prison last year, she has continued his work, both as an advocate for the idea of a free Russia, a post-Putin Russia, a campaign for sanctions on Putin from governments around the world and sanctions on his regime, not against Russia. She hastens to add she doesn't want people to suffer in Russia, but she wants Putin's cronies specifically to suffer and to be punished for their crimes.
For me, it's very close campaign against this regime and campaign in my husband's memory. Because my husband was the most vocal critic of Vladimir Putin. And of course, it's very important for me to keep his legacy, to keep memory about him.
And she's also taken over the leadership of a thing called the Anti-Corruption Foundation. The Anti-Corruption Foundation was founded by her late husband, Alexi Navalny, specifically to conduct investigations into corruption in the regime, and published many and the foundation continues under her leadership to publish, including one this week. On the same morning that I interviewed her, the foundation published its findings that the former culture minister had amassed $74.5 million worth of prime real estate in Moscow and in Europe. And who knew that culture in Russia could be so lucrative?
Yes, indeed. I would love it if you could tell me how much danger perhaps Yulia and her children are in. She's got 2 kids and they live in exile in Lithuania. But we know she's been a target because of her leadership now of her late husband's Anti-Corruption Foundation, as you've just mentioned. So tell me about that and whether even traveling here to Australia might have put her life in danger.
Well, even before her husband was murdered, she'd been detained by the regime, her home raided many times. Although her late husband's Novichok poisoning case was world famous, it wasn't known, and I only read about it when I read his memoir, Patriot, that she also got a dose of Novichok, a milder dose. It didn't kill her, but she's also been subject to a nerve agent attack by Putin's thugs. So she's really already gone through quite a lot. But she and her supporters now judge that it would be a fatal step to return to Russia, as it proved for her late husband.
From one side, I can answer you that it's not safe for me anywhere. But from other side, if you think about a lot, there is no sense to do what I do. If to think about security all the time, if to think about if it's safe for me or it's not safe, of course it's will come into your mind and it will start living in your mind. That's why I'm trying not to think about it a lot. But I understand that Vladimir Putin, who starts wars, who poisons his political opponents, who kills his political opponents, can do anything he wants, but it's not a reason to stop and to think about security a lot, but of course I'm trying to be careful.
Exactly how much danger she is in, I can't objectively judge. I could point out that last year one of her supporters who works with her and with the Anti-Corruption Foundation and also, like her, lives in Lithuania in exile from Russia to protect themselves from Putin's regime. His name's Leonid Volkov. He was the campaign manager for Alexei Navalny. He was attacked by 2 men wielding hammers last year in Lithuania. Had his arm broken and multiple injuries. He's recovered, and in fact, he's travelling with Yulia this week in Australia. But if that gives you a hint of the sort of risk that they run, there's that. She's travelling with her son, who's 17 years old. Her daughter, though, is not travelling. Her daughter is 23, And this is it's a bit of a wistful anecdote here that Yulia told you, which I wasn't able to use in print. She said that from a very young age, her daughter had wanted to come to Australia and New Zealand. She was fascinated by the idea, fascinated by the wildlife, and that Alexi had said, her dad had said to her, save up all your pocket money and then one day you can pay for your ticket and go to Australia. So she did. She saved, Yulia said she saved all her birthday money, her graduation presents from her grandparents. She saved all the money to come to Australia, but then Putin's crew ransacked their apartment and took the kids' money. So she hasn't made it yet, but she's about to start studying in Yale, and presumably, if she keeps safe, she'll get here one day.
Which brings us to Yulia, because I wonder how much of a threat is she to Vladimir Putin? You know, as you pointed out in your interview with her, Alexi Navalny, he wrote in his memoir, Patriot, which was published posthumously, that, quote, of the two of us, she holds even more radical views and that she hates the Putin regime, quote, probably even more than I do. So I guess, how radical are her views and how much of a threat is she to Putin?
Well, on the second part, possibly the best way of measuring that is by the way he reacts to her. He has multiple criminal cases running against her, all on trumped-up charges. He's officially listed her as a terrorist. And just with that alone, if she were to return to Russia, she would face life in prison, although in realistic terms, maybe much worse. So that's one measure. He's obviously quite concerned about her. The Anti-Corruption Foundation, which she leads, he's obviously quite worried about that and the revelations that it continues to make about him, his corrupt dealings and his regime's corrupt dealings, because in the last 3 years alone, he's brought criminal charges against 76 cases of people donating money to the foundation. So just to give money to the foundation is exposing people to his criminal charges. So he's obviously quite worried about her if he's going to these lengths to persecute her, to keep her out of the country and try to shut her down.
And it's been reported elsewhere that it's her goal to run for president of Russia one day when Putin is no longer in power. Did you get the sense, or did she say anything about that being a future goal?
Yes, I did ask her about that. She was undecided. She was ambiguous about how to handle that. As she said, I want to be a part of positive change.
My plan is to come back to Russia. Okay. Because I never wanted to live somewhere abroad, somewhere in exile, to come back, to help my country to be a democratic country, to be normal. You know, my plan is not something fairy tale, to be a normal democratic country. And I think that people in Russia are absolutely ready.
She has said in other times that she would stand for the presidency post-Putin, but she didn't seem decided on that, so I guess she's keeping her options open. Maybe that's simply practical, but maybe also help to keep Putin on edge, I don't know. Yeah. But that's what she said. She said, everything can change suddenly in Russia. Maybe I can go back in 1 year, maybe 10 years, maybe never.
And now we've just heard this morning, as we're recording this, that Foreign Minister Penny Wong has imposed sanctions on 14 of Putin's cronies, essentially. So was that her goal in visiting here?
Yes, she was brought to Australia as a guest of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and I presume that this was pre-arranged, pre-organised, coinciding with Yulia Navalnaya's meeting today with Penny Wong in Canberra, as well as other members of the Australian leadership, that these sanctions were organised. It is her goal. She campaigns around the world for countries to impose new sanctions on Putin and his circle. So she would be doubtless very pleased with that. She would doubtless want more. She told me that the Canadians are the world's best practice in terms of imposing sanctions on Russia. In particular, she was very happy about what the Canadians had done in June, which was to take the entire list of 50 Putin cronies and relatives, including his former wife and his cousins, that was published by the Anti-Corruption Foundation, and the Canadians imposed Magnitsky-style sanctions on every one of them. What Penny Wong has announced in Australia today is sanctions on 14 such people, which bar them from travel to Australia, subject any assets they may have here to confiscation, but more importantly, as Yulia said, is that these countries, Australia, Canada, she said, because, to quote her, she said, because they're a little bit aside.
That's why you can be a pioneer so many things like sanctions to show the example to all the world and so on. That's why it's very interesting for me to come here. It's very interesting for me to meet with Australian politicians.
She wants now other countries, she wants the Europeans, the Americans, everybody else now to follow the Canadian lead and impose sanctions on all 50 of what's called the Navalny List 50.
And of course, the very other side of this coin is really how embraced Russian President Vladimir Putin has been by the American President Donald Trump. So I guess tell me about that and how she feels about this relationship. And in particular, you know, Trump's greeting Vladimir Putin on U.S. soil just recently in Alaska, because obviously it was very chummy.
Yes, she thinks that it's very unfortunate that Trump is rehabilitating Putin in the world community and in world politics, that a country that a leader that has led an illegal invasion is now being treated as an equal by Trump, invited to the US, as you say, literally given the red carpet treatment. And although Trump has promised repeatedly to impose sanctions and, quote, severe consequences, unquote, on Putin if he doesn't make haste to end the war in Ukraine, Putin just flouts all of those threats, has only intensified his attacks on Ukraine, and Trump has done absolutely nothing to enforce his own threats and ultimata. So he's obviously not serious about forcing Putin to the table. Yulia Navalnaya would like to meet Trump to make her case. Whether Trump will agree to a meeting, who knows? But certainly she thinks that it's unfortunate that he has succeeded in elevating Putin, in demonstrating to other countries, other leaders, look, this is a normal relationship you can have with this Putin character now. And as she said, as Yulia said in the interview, leaders of democratic countries are chosen by their people who chose Putin.
American politicians, European politicians, they are chosen in normal democratic elections. They are chosen by people of their countries, but by whom Putin is chosen.
That's right. And I think she made the point how egregious, in her view, certainly it is that that Trump is treating Putin as an equal, as an equal on his soil. And I mean, did you get the sense that is she just astonished or?
I think it's possibly difficult to imagine anything would astonish Yulia Navalnaya. She's seen so much, suffered so much, been so disappointed and injured by the regime. But as she says, she's an optimistic person, and so was Alexi, and she's determined to remain optimistic throughout. She's pretty evidently quite a steely character to continue despite all of the threats and all of the dangers. And in meeting her, she's very composed, very determined, and shows no sign of either being discouraged or frightened. And in fact, she says, I know that I'm not safe anywhere. There's nowhere in the world that's safe for me now, but she refuses to be afraid.
And then, of course, also happening this week is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting, or as John Bolton, Trump's former national security advisor in his first term as president, referred to it the other day, the League of Authoritarian Gentlemen. So I guess tell us how significant this meeting is, who's there, and is this illustrating a rise in authoritarian power? Like, what's happening here? Because, of course, it's quite timely. She's, of course, trying to bring democratic governments to sanction Putin, and There he is, among other leaders, with Xi Jinping. So tell us about this.
I thought it was quite generous of John Bolton to call them gentlemen.
Yes, indeed.
When you have mass murderers like Kim Jong-un, Vladimir Putin in the room, and the world's most effective oppressor of the most number of citizens in the world, Xi Jinping, in the room. I thought it was quite a generous description by John Bolton.
It is.
So the Shanghai Cooperation Organization was founded by China. It started as the Shanghai Five in 1996. There are 26 leaders on the latest count that I've seen in meeting in China this week. The group continues to grow, and Donald Trump, by abandoning not only democratic practice at home, but advocacy for democracy abroad, by cultivating and rehabilitating Vladimir Putin, has given new energy and encouragement to the authoritarian nations and made it clear that there is no real price to pay for an authoritarian leader at the hands of the US president in any case. That, if anything, he celebrates and elevates dictators above traditional US allies. So have they been emboldened? I would say yes. Has the group increased in size and scope? Definitely. And the single greatest evidence for that is the fact that the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, is in attendance, or has been in attendance earlier this week at the meeting and had a one-on-one summit with Xi Jinping.
I believe this was the first time in 7 years that India's Prime Minister has been in China. So
yes,
notable.
Yes. So there was a big rupture between China and India in 2020 when, along their shared border, disputed border, the troops of the two sides fell to fighting because of a protocol to prevent escalation. They don't carry arms, but they killed each other with rocks and sticks and fist fights. And Narendra Modi said that India was hurt and angry and downgraded relations with China and hadn't been to China since.
And that was a boon for the West, right? Like the West had spent decades trying
to... This was an undreamed of misstep by China by so alienating and angering India and making it impossible for any self-respecting Indian Prime Minister to deal normally with China. The West had been gifted India as a new, closer partner, not an ally. The Indians are very careful to maintain, well, they were one of the co-founders with Indonesia of the non-aligned movement in the 1950s, and they are careful to maintain what they call their strategic autonomy. But suddenly, Modi became much more accommodating of the West, worked much more closely with the West. One of the clearest evidences for that is that he took India into the Quad at the leader level. The Quad, of course, being a group of 4 democracies, Australia, the US, India and Japan. And this was celebrated as taking one of the swing states that will help determine the outcome of the long-run power confrontation between the US on the one hand and China on the other, into the West's camp. Not entirely, but pretty convincingly. Now, because of Trump's tariffs on India and his dismissive treatment of India, Modi has decided that it's time to exercise his option to resume normalized relations with China, and that's what he's done this week.
And Peter, I wanted to bring this back to Yulia Navalnaya because it's so interesting. We've obviously got this sort of coziness, I guess, of authoritarian leaders in China and, legitimization, perhaps, of Vladimir Putin. And yet when you asked Yulia Navalnaya whether she thinks the world and Europeans should be angrier with Putin's unceasing aggression, she said no. She doesn't think they should be. So why did she say this? And were you surprised? I was a bit surprised. But
Yes. Well, I asked that question because that same morning we got news that the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, had been in a plane over Bulgaria when its navigation system was jammed, and it turns out it was electronic warfare from Russia, deliberately endangering the safety of that flight. And in the end, the pilot had to land the plane using paper maps because of all the digital shutdown imposed by Russia. Now, von der Leyen is the closest thing that the Europeans have to a prime minister for all of Europe. So this is a pretty aggressive tactic. And so I said to Yulia Navalnaya, do you think that the Europeans, maybe the wider world, should be angrier at these aggressions that Putin continues to wage against Europe, as well as the war in Ukraine? And her answer was, I don't think the Europeans or the world should be angry with Putin. She said, I think the world should be brave and confident in confronting Putin. And she said, the logic was, she said, people are afraid of what he might do, but he's already done everything.
Yeah.
And then she ran through the list, starting with, stealing elections, murdering her husband, all the way through to last year rattling the nuclear saber, threatening to use tactical nuclear weapons on the battlefield in Ukraine, which would have potentially dire implications for other countries in Europe, before that was shut down when he received helpful tips from the US, China and India that would be a particularly bad idea. So he's abandoned that line of rhetoric. But her reasoning is he's already done everything he can do. He's throwing everything at the Russian people, at Ukraine and Europe. Don't be afraid. Be brave. Confront him.
It does make you wonder what it will take, because you just read over the weekend, one of your previous pieces was about how few democracies, I guess, there are thriving in the world these days, right? I mean, we really sort of are under assault, I guess, really, aren't we? Could this be a tipping point? And if not, it makes you wonder, what will it take?
Well, exactly. I mean, at what point does the frog jump out of the boiling pot? Because the pot is boiling. This has been described, the moment we're living in has been described as the third wave of authoritarianism, of anti-democracy in the world. The first was in the 1930s, with the rise of fascism. The second was in the consolidation of communism during the Cold War, and we are now in the third. It's been dated starting in 2007, so around the time of the global financial crisis, and continuing to this day, where the number of democratic states continues to decline year on year. And the number, according to the Economist Intelligence Unit, the number of what they describe as full democracies in the world has shrunk to 25 out of nearly 200 countries on the planet, and shrinking. By the way, the US is not on its list of full democracies.
Fascinating.
A democracy isn't just an election and a set of electoral rules.
Yeah.
It's a whole mindset, a system, and a pattern of belief and behaviour by a people and their political class, and it's been breaking down for years, and that's continuing.
Well, thank you so much, Peter, for your time.
Always a pleasure, Samantha.